Ah, dear friends, as we are gathered here around this fire, I would like to open the doors of an ancient world. We will go so far back in time that perhaps we will feel the breeze of those days on our faces. Today I will take you to the banks of the ancient Nile River, to the heart of a civilization that was born from the fertile soil fed by the Nile and shaped the course of history. Egypt. Egypt was not only a kingdom rising in the shadow of the pyramids, but also a place ruled by the gods who connected the sky and the earth. Everything in Egypt found meaning in the gods: the rising of the sun, the flooding of the Nile, death and rebirth. It was all part of a sacred cycle. But who were these gods? Who were the beings that shaped this ancient mythology? What I am about to tell you is profound, ancient, and fascinating. These gods not only ruled over people, they also held their destiny in their hands. Each one of them was the protagonist of a great story in this ancient land. From Ra to Osiris, from Isis to Anubis, each god was a touchstone in the lives of the Egyptian people. When you hear their legends, when you witness their stories, you will begin to understand this world as if you were an Egyptian who lived thousands of years ago. Think of the people who lived in those times. They saw the sunrise every morning as Ra's journey across the sky. They associated every overflow of the Nile with Hapi's generosity. They imagined the soul of every deceased person going before Osiris and being judged. You know, my friends, these mythological stories are not just tales of the past. Even today, we have much to learn from them. How much they tell us about people's lives, their beliefs, their perception of the universe. And now I am opening the doors to this magical world. Get ready to embark on a journey into the history, mythology, and legends of Egypt, intertwined with the gods. Slowly sit back, close your eyes, and step into the ancient lands of Egypt. Prepare to hear how the gods shaped the sky and the earth, and how these gods were deeply rooted in the lives of the Egyptian people. Now our story begins. My friends, now I want to take you much deeper, to the early days of Egypt, a period of time, a period of human history almost forgotten. Close your eyes and imagine an ancient world formed out of an infinite void, where the cool waters of the Nile slowly flowed by. In those times, people spoke to nature itself, hearing the voices of the gods and the whispers of the wind, the river, and the sky. In Egypt, faith was not just a form of worship, it was life itself, at the center of everything. So where does Egyptian mythology originate? Thousands of years ago, when the people of Egypt began to create myths to explain the world, these myths became a guide to life. From the earliest times in Egypt, everything depended on a cosmos full of gods. The gods who created the world were the forces that shaped not only nature, but also the souls and lives of people. Early people believed that the presence of the gods could be felt directly on the earth. The Nile overflowing, the winds blowing, the sun rising and setting. Each of these things happened at the will of a god. And this belief system, my friends, was based on a very deep philosophical understanding: order and chaos. The ancient people of Egypt believed that these two forces were in eternal battle. For the universe to continue, for life to be sustained, these two forces had to be in balance. At the divine symbol of order, justice and righteousness, was the force that kept everything in harmony. Opposite to it stood chaos, the forces of disorder, disorganization, and disaster. The gods of Egypt shaped the universe by striking a balance between these two forces. At was at the center of everything. It represented not only the balance of the universe, but also order in people's lives. Pharaohs had to maintain justice and order on earth by protecting Ma'at. The people lived every day to maintain the balance of Ma'at. It was the power of Ma'at that made it possible for the sun to rise every morning and for Ra to continue his journey in the sky. If Ma'at was disturbed, the world would descend into chaos. The Nile would not overflow, crops would not grow, diseases and disasters would be everywhere. But in here, my dear friends, chaos could never be completely eradicated. It was always lurking around the corner. People in ancient Egypt knew the fragility of this balance, and perhaps that is why they served their gods with such devotion. Every step, every breath was to maintain this balance. For them, maintaining this balance was not only the will of the gods, it was an absolute necessity for the sustenance of life. Now, my friends, imagine yourself in that ancient world for a moment. Every morning you see the sunrise as a great challenge of Ra. When night falls, you feel the shadows of chaos waiting for an opportunity to overcome Ra. But every day Ra triumphs over chaos through the power of Ma'at. With every Nile flood, you know that Hapi owes its fertility to Ma'at. You feel that you are a small point in this great balance of the gods. And that's when you realize life can only exist if this balance is maintained. The gods of Egypt were the guardians of this struggle between order and chaos. Each with their own power and story, they existed to maintain this great cosmic balance. And this balance was the most important reality not only for the gods, but also for every Egyptian. Ah, dear friends, I will now take you back to the most ancient times of Egyptian mythology, to the birth of the universe and the gods. The creation myths are the oldest stories that explain the mystery of the universe. These ancient stories tell how both nature and the gods came into being. But you should know that in a civilization as vast and multi-layered as Egypt, there was no single story of creation. Every great city, every temple, had its own creation myth. That's why in sacred cities like Heliopolis, Hermopolis, Memphis, and Thebes, they depicted the beginning of the universe with different gods and different narratives. Let's start with Heliopolis. This was one of the most sacred places in Egypt. And according to Heliopolis, everything was made of a great void, a primordial water. This eternal water was called Nun. The beginning of everything was in this silent, dark, and bottomless water. One day, from the depths of the Nun rose Adam, the first god. Adam was a self-existent, self-created god. He was the first light, the first life of the universe. With nothing in his hands, only his will and power, he began to create the universe. He first gave birth to two children, Shu and Tefnut. Shu was the god of air and Tefnut was the goddess of moisture and humidity. They in turn created their own children, Nut, the goddess of the sky, and Geb, the god of the earth. Nut was a giant goddess, full of stars, whose head soared high into the sky. Geb was a powerful god, representing the vast lands and mountains. And just like that, Nut, the sky, and Geb, the earth, were separated and the order of the universe was created. Nut adorned the night with her stars, while Geb carried all the life of the earth in his arms. But this was not a single narrative of the creation myth, friends. In Hermopolis, creation was much more complex and mysterious. The belief here was that the universe was created by 4 pairs of gods. These gods represented water, darkness, eternity, and chaos. Each had come together to organize the primordial chaos of the universe. With the combination of these 4 pairs, the basic elements of the universe emerged. In the creation myth of Hermopolis, the gods intertwined with each other to shape the universe. This creation was like a dance. Each god and goddess was part of the cosmic order. And then let's move on to Memphis. Ah, Memphis. Here a god named Ptah was in charge of creation. Ptah was one of the most powerful creator gods of Egypt. But unlike other creator gods, he created everything with just his thoughts and words. Ptah's power was in a divine word that shaped the entire being of the universe. He first designed the entire universe in his mind and then spoke to make it a reality. In other words, the universe was born from Ptah's mind. Ptah's power of creation was much more abstract than that of the other gods, for he was the god of thought and word. With his power, gods were born, the universe took shape, people came into existence. And when we travel to Thebes, that ancient city, we come across Amun. Amun was the greatest god of Thebes. He was the divine symbol of existence and invisibility. Amun's role in creation was different because he was both omnipresent and invisible. Amun was the mysterious creative force of the universe, an all-seeing but never fully understood being. His creative power had a quiet but profound effect. For the Thebites, Amun was the mysterious and holy creative power of the universe. Now, dear friends, close your eyes and put these 4 great creation myths together. Each one has a different meaning, a different explanation, but they all try to answer the same great question: how did the universe come into existence? And each narrative opens a different door, shows us a different path. But it is not over yet, my friends. Let us now turn to the first gods at the center of these creation myths: Shu, Tefnut, Geb, and Nut. They were the gods who established the first order of the universe. Shu bridged the gap between the sky and the earth, while Tefnut, the goddess of moisture and rain, ensured the continuation of life. Geb was the great earth god who embraced all the creatures of the earth. He made the soil fertile every day, allowing life to flourish. Nut was the great goddess who held the sky above her head and adorned the night with her stars. It was believed that Nut continued the cycle of the universe by rebirthing the sun every morning after swallowing it every night. Each of these gods was a force in the daily life of the Egyptian people. They were not only mythical figures, but also divine beings who directly shaped the lives of the people. With the help of these gods, the Egyptians tried to understand and control the workings of the universe. These great stories of creation were the ancient wisdom that explained the existence not only of gods but also of human beings. And so, my friends, the great creation myths of Egypt tell us the stories of the gods and the birth of the universe. But remember that these myths are not only stories of the past, they are also the most profound expressions of the human endeavor to understand oneself and the world. Ah, my dear listeners, I will now introduce you to Ra, one of the most magnificent and powerful gods of Egyptian mythology. He is the brightest light in the sky, the source of life, the father of the gods. Ra was not only a god, but also the most sacred being who ensured the order of the universe and the continuity of life for the Egyptian people. But Ra's story is not the story of an ordinary god. There was an epic journey he took every day, a cycle that for the Egyptians was the essence of life. If you are ready, let us witness Ra's light and his battle with darkness together. Every morning, just before dawn, Ra sits on his throne in the sky and begins to rise from the east in a golden boat. At that moment, the whole world is illuminated by his light, the darkness of night dissipates, and a day full of life begins. In the early morning, Ra embraces the whole world with his light. He brings life to all living things, fertility to the fields, life to the rivers. People, animals, plants. Everything breathes with Ra's light. Ra's rising in the morning is not just the rising of the sun, it is the beginning of life anew. But this journey is only the beginning. Ra ascends to the top of the sky at noon. At that moment, he is at his most powerful, sitting on his golden throne in the sky, ruling the entire universe. When Ra's light is at its strongest, the land of Egypt shines like gold. His energy and warmth affect both men and gods. When Ra reaches its zenith in the sky at noon, the order of the universe is in perfect balance. This is the moment when Ra's power is at its peak. Nothing can stand in the way of his light. As his golden boat glides slowly across the sky, the Egyptians know that Ra gives them life, and they pray to him. But my dear friends, for every rise there is a fall. Ra's journey is not limited to this mighty moment in the sky. Every afternoon the sun begins its descent to the west. Ra travels west, into the darkness, into the underworld. And it is here that Ra's greatest test begins. As the sun sets, Ra embarks on a journey into the world of darkness, the underworld, the land of the dead. It is such a journey that only the bravest gods can take on such a challenge. As Ra descends into the underworld, there is an enemy waiting for him, Apophis. Apophis, the gigantic serpent, the symbol of darkness, chaos, and destruction. Apophis lurks every night to extinguish the light of Ra and plunge the order into chaos. Apophis prowls the depths of darkness and attacks Ra's boat. His only goal is to destroy Ra and plunge the universe into darkness. At that moment when Ra goes underground every night, the world holds its breath, because this struggle determines the fate of the universe. As Ra moves forward in his boat, there are gods who help him, Seth and Ma. At her, Seth is a powerful warrior god who protects Ra's path. Ma, it represents order and justice. When Seth draws his sword and lunges at Apophis, this struggle to maintain the balance of the universe is ignited. Apophis tries to wrap his gigantic body around Ra's boat, but Seth fights him with his sword. Ra never leaves his boat. His light does not go out even in the midst of this darkness. But this struggle is relived every night, my friends. Every morning Ra emerges from the underworld and rises again, signaling that Apophis has been defeated and the universe is once again in order. The rising of the sun is not just a natural phenomenon, but a great victory for the gods. Apophis attacks again every night, but Ra's light rises again every morning. And so the cycle of the universe continues, life goes on. As Ra is victorious in this eternal battle with darkness, life continues to exist. This epic journey of Ra, my dear friends, was a source of life not only for the Egyptian people, but for the entire universe. Life, born every morning with his light, was protected every night with his battle against darkness. Ra was not just a sun god, he was the greatest power that maintained the balance of the universe. His journey tells us about the order of the universe and the victory of light over darkness. This ancient myth shows how the Egyptian people understood the universe, how they grasped the cycle of life. May the light of Ra always shine on us. May darkness never prevail. My dear listeners, I am going to tell you one of the most touching and profound stories of Egyptian mythology. If you are ready, we begin in the world of the gods. Here is the story of Osiris, who united the ancient kingdom of Egypt and ruled even after death. Osiris was the first ruler of Egypt, and under his rule the land was filled with peace and justice. The fields bloomed with fertility and the Nile River overflowed with life every season. Unity and peace prevailed among the people because Osiris was not only a king but also a wise god who guided his people. His wife Isis always stood by his side as a loyal, strong, and wise queen. But my friends, for every good there is an opposite. For every light there is a shadow. Osiris had a shadow, his brother Seth. Seth was a god who burned with jealousy and greed. The peace and unity of Osiris' kingdom only infuriated his dark soul. Seth felt that all this splendor should belong to him. And it was here that Egypt's greatest betrayal took place. Seth lured his brother Osiris into a trap. He had a huge chest built for him, a chest designed in such a way that only Osiris could fit inside. He presented it to his brother during a great feast, and Osiris, not realizing the trick, entered the chest. At that moment, Seth closed the lid and sealed it. Dear listeners, it was not just a betrayal, it was the end of an era. Osiris was thrown into the river in the ark, and this great god, having lost his body, was plunged into eternal darkness. However, the story does not end here, because love always overcomes betrayal. Osiris' faithful wife Isis did not remain silent through it all. She crossed rivers, mountains, and deserts in search of his body to bring him back. She did not give up until she found every piece of it and put it back together. It was a display of devotion that even the gods could admire. Finally, Isis put her husband's body back together and used her magical power to bring him back to life. But dear listeners, Osiris' return was not a full resurrection. He did not return to this world. His place would now be in the underworld, in the realm of the dead. Osiris became the ruling god in the Egyptian underworld after death. Under his just and wise rule, the souls of the dead would be judged, and no one would be wronged. He was the king of the land of the dead. He ensured the order of the afterlife. But Isis' efforts did not end there. She gave birth to a child with her husband Osiris, Horus. This child was born to avenge his father's death. Isis raised Horus with great care, teaching him strength and wisdom. As Horus grew, he gained the strength to avenge his father and wage war against Seth. And so, my dear friends, this great battle came one day. Horus faced his uncle Seth to avenge his father Seth. The great battle between the gods began. Horus fought against Seth, but it was not just a physical battle, it was a battle between order and chaos, between justice and tyranny. Horus represented the justice of his father, Seth was the god of chaos and destruction. At the end of this great battle, Horus was victorious and Seth's dark reign came to an end. Horus became the new king of Egypt, succeeding his father. Egypt's unity was restored and order was restored. Osiris, however, remained the underworld as king of the dead. His name would be remembered forever as a god who judged souls and administered justice after day. Horus sat on the throne of Ra, while Osiris ruled in the underworld, maintaining order in both worlds of Egypt. Dear friends, this story shows us not only a battle between gods, but also how powerful love and loyalty can be, and that justice will always prevail. The death and resurrection of Osiris is one of the most profound symbols of Egyptian mythology, telling us that life and death are a cycle, that every death is a new beginning. Oh, my dear friends, now I will tell you the stories of three powerful goddesses, each with their own unique power and story, each with a special place in the pantheon of goddesses. Allow me to take you on a journey into the magical world of these goddesses. First, Isis. As soon as you hear her name, loyalty and protection come to mind. But dear listeners, Isis is not only a protector, she is also magic. After Osiris' death, she found the power to bring him back to life. This is no ordinary power, but a magic imbued with ancient wisdom, a magic that dominates nature itself. Imagine being able to bring back a soul that could not find its place in the world. When Isis collected Osiris' dismembered body, she acted with the determination of a goddess, not just a wife. At every step, she used the magic and power of Egypt to bring her husband back to life. Isis' magic was not limited to bringing him back from the dead. She was like a mother protecting all the people of Egypt. Whenever danger approached, whenever illness struck, Isis' protective wings were over her people. She was the goddess whose name was revered in every house and temple in Egypt. But Isis was also a teacher. As she raised her son Horus, she taught him not only to fight, but also to be wise. Horus had the strength to take revenge, but Isis taught him patience. For true victory came with patience and wisdom. Even though Isis had the greatest magic power in this world, she placed love and loyalty above all else. And now, my dear friends, let us look at another goddess who stands next to Isis, Hathor. Hathor was a goddess of love, music, and motherhood, a goddess who gave warmth to the heart. When her name was mentioned, hearts softened and music began. Hathor's power came not from battlefields, but from loving melodies that touched people's souls. She was a goddess who nourished not only the physical world, but also the souls of people. In her temples, instruments were played, dances were danced, and songs were sung, because Hathor was a reflection of love and happiness. Every living being who looked into her face felt more peaceful and full of joy. But don't just think of Hathor as a goddess of fun. She was also the Egyptian goddess of fertility. Her touch was in the fertility of every newborn child of every field. A mother hugging her child, the first crop of a field, Hathor's presence was felt in all these moments. Her love was like a light that spread to every corner. But now, dear listeners, let us come to a quieter, deeper goddess, Nephthys. Nephthys was the goddess of death and transition. In the Osiris mythos, she is known as the wife of Seth, the symbol of the dark side. But this does not mean that she would be associated only with evil. Nephthys reflected the dark side of death, but it was a transition, not something to be feared. She was the goddess who welcomed the souls of the dead, bringing them safely to the afterlife. Unlike Isis, Nephthys was silent, but her presence was profound. Thanks to her, the dead left this world without fear. She guided their journey, leading them from darkness to light. Nephthys' role was to protect Osiris after his death. Despite the evil deeds of her consort Seth, Nephthys was loyal to Osiris and worked with Isis to reunite him. Her loyalty softened the dark side of death, easing the fear of the transition. Although Nephthys was the goddess of death, she actually carried a hope beyond death, because her presence reminded us that death was not an end, but a beginning. Dear friends, here are three magnificent goddesses of Egyptian mythology: Isis, the goddess of magic and fidelity; Hathor, the symbol of love and music; and Nephthys, who rules the transition through death. Each played a unique role in Egypt's deep belief system. And the stories of these goddesses tell us about the deep meaning of love, fidelity, and life after death. Ah, Seth, the god of the furious desert winds, the howling storms, and chaos. Whenever I think of him, a solitary shadow roams the vast, scorched lands of Egypt in my mind. Seth was a lonely god, but he was never weak. His power was like a sandstorm erupting in the desert, uncontrollable, unbridled, and devastating. He was one of the darkest gods. But remember, dear friends, Seth's power wasn't just about destruction. He was a symbol of chaos. Yet he knew that sometimes chaos was necessary to rebuild order. Once upon a time, Seth was a god intertwined with the nature of Egypt. His name was often invoked in the prayers of the people living in the desert, because he embodied the harsh nature of that landscape. When storms erupted, Seth would come to mind for the people. These storms were an expression of his wrath. The sands danced with the intensity of the winds, the sky darkened, and earth and sky merged. In those moments, you could feel Seth's power. He was the master of the desert, but he ruled not only the barren lands but also the darkness within the human soul. Seth's story is legendary, marked by his struggle with Osiris. Two brothers, one representing order, the other chaos. But this tale is more than just a conflict between two gods. It reflects the most fundamental conflict in the universe, the eternal war between order and chaos. Osiris was the god of fertility and life. He symbolized the sprawling fields of crops along the rivers, the fertile lands, and a life of stability. Seth, on the other hand, was the god of the desert and destruction. He ruled the barren, arid lands. This battle between two opposing forces was mirrored in the lives of the Egyptian people. On one side were the fertile lands brought to life by the floods of the Nile, while on the other was the dry, unforgiving nature of the desert. So this conflict also caused deep strife among the gods. Seth's anger towards Osiris was more than just simple sibling rivalry. He wanted to sit on Egypt's throne and rule the world, but Osiris was beloved by the people. He was the god of justice and prosperity. Seth envied this love, for chaos and fear did not bind people to him. Thus Seth devised a dark plan. This cunning god decided to kill Osiris and tear his body apart. When that fateful night arrived, Seth took advantage of Osiris's trust and trapped him. He dismembered his brother and scattered the pieces across the world. In doing so, he destroyed not just a king, but also order and peace. But dear friends, you must know that Seth wasn't just a destroyer. His fury and chaos were sometimes necessary for establishing a greater order. Yes, Seth is dark, but we must remember that without darkness, we wouldn't know the value of light. That's why chaos has its place in Seth's story. Without the power of chaos, order would lose its meaning. So even though Seth fought against Osiris and tore him apart, he held an important balance within himself. One of Seth's greatest strengths was his connection to the desert. The desert was both a threat and a trial for the people of Egypt. Surviving those vast hot lands wasn't easy. The desert tested a person, measuring their strength and endurance. Seth was the god of these challenges, storms, and the harsh nature. His power emerged not only in battles but also in the brutal face of nature. When a sandstorm blew through the desert, people felt Seth's wrath. Fighting him was impossible, because Seth was the storm itself. He symbolized uncontrolled nature, yet living alongside him was a necessity. You couldn't eliminate the desert, but you could learn to coexist with it. Seth played a significant role not only in his conflict with Osiris, but also in Ra's battle with the sun. Each night when Ra descended into the underworld, he fought against Apophis, the embodiment of chaos. One of the gods aiding Ra in this struggle was Seth. This reflected Seth's role as a warrior against chaos, because chaos didn't only bring destruction, it also gave rise to a greater order. With each dawn, thanks to Seth's efforts, the sun would rise back into the sky. This shows that although Seth was the god of chaos, he had an important place in the balance of the universe. So dear friends, Seth's story is complex and profound. He was a representative of destruction and chaos, but he also played a crucial role in maintaining balance in the universe. His struggle with Osiris was not just a battle between two gods, but an endless war between order and chaos. And Seth was a god who could stand on both sides of this conflict. Dear friends, the story of Horus is one of the oldest legends that echo through the lands of Egypt. It's the tale of a child, a god fighting to avenge his father and restore order. But this isn't just a story of revenge. Horus' journey is about protecting a legacy, fighting for his people, and ultimately becoming a symbol of justice. Horus' birth was the continuation of a tragic tale. His father Osiris was betrayed and killed by his own brother Seth, his body torn apart and scattered across the world. But Osiris' beloved wife, Isis, never gave up. Isis, the most powerful of goddesses, was known for her loyalty and magic. She turned to all the gods, performed powerful spells, and managed to gather the pieces of Osiris. Yet Osiris could no longer walk this world. He became the ruler of the underworld, the judge of the dead. But a part of him remained in this world, a hope. Isis was pregnant with Osiris' child, Horus. But when Isis gave birth to Horus, she had to protect him with great care and secrecy. Seth wasn't going to let any heir to the throne live. Even as a baby, Horus was already a target. Isis fled to Egypt's secluded swamps, raising her son in hiding, far from Seth's wrath. She stayed on guard every moment, for Seth's spies were everywhere. Horus grew up in his mother's shadow, but inside him burned a desire to avenge his father. And even at a young age, Horus was strong, brave, and fearless. He was the god of the sky. And just like the falcon that soared freely in the heavens, Horus was already planning how to reclaim the throne of Egypt. Years passed, Horus grew into a young and powerful god. He was the leader Egypt deserved, but to claim that title he had to fight for it. Seth was still ruling Egypt with an iron fist, and Horus had a long, hard road ahead. This was not just a physical battle, but a great struggle where gods and destiny collided. The battlefields witnessed the epic clashes between Horus and Seth. In the sky, in the rivers, in the deserts, they fought everywhere. Horus' gaze was sharp and determined, like that of a falcon. Seth was destructive, like a desert storm, the very embodiment of chaos. Their fight would determine Egypt's future. This war was not just a clash of physical strength, but also of beliefs and principles. Horus fought to protect his father's legacy and to restore order. Seth, on the other hand, was bent on spreading chaos and solidifying his rule. Their battles raged on for a long time. According to one legend, Horus and Seth's struggle was so intense that Horus lost an eye. This lost eye would later be known as the Eye of Horus, one of Egypt's most sacred symbols representing protection, health, and divine power. But even this loss didn't stop Horus. He fought on with not only physical strength but spiritual power as well, for this was a war that would decide the fate of an entire people. In the end, Horus emerged victorious. Seth lost his power and his throne. Horus avenged his father and became the ruler of Egypt. But this victory wasn't just Horus' victory, it was a victory for all of Egypt. Horus restored order and justice. The people knew that as long as Horus sat on the throne, they would have peace. He was the protector of Egypt, the master of the sky and the kingdom. With Horus' victory, Egypt's pharaohs inherited his legacy. Pharaohs were seen as Horus representatives on earth. Every new pharaoh was believed to carry the power and sanctity of Horus. The order and justice Horus brought to Egypt continued under the reign of the pharaohs. That's why pharaohs were seen as more than just kings, they were the earthly embodiment of a god. And so the story of Horus was passed down through generations of Egypt's kings and people. He was not just a god, but also a leader, a protector, and a hero. Horus' victory marked one of the most important turning points in Egypt's history. His courage and determination would forever echo in the heart of Egypt. Ah, my dear friends, the journey of the soul, the place where everything begins and ends. In Egypt, death wasn't the end of life, but the start of another existence. And this is where Anubis comes in. Once in the dark cemeteries, silent temples, and the deep shadows of the underworld, they whispered his name. Anubis, the jackal-headed god, protector of the dead, guide through the afterlife, and judge of souls. His presence was a promise that even after death, peace and order would still be maintained. Anubis' role wasn't just to guard the souls of the dead. He also took great care of their physical bodies. The Egyptians believed that preserving the body was essential for the soul to safely reach the afterlife. That's why Anubis was always at the forefront of mummification and funeral rites. His hands carefully wrapped each part of the body, patiently waiting for the day it would rise again. Like a loyal jackal, always alert, Anubis stood watch. Mummification wasn't just about protecting the physical body, it was preparing the soul for its long, difficult journey. The heart of the deceased would be removed and carefully preserved. In the afterlife, this heart would face the ultimate test, the judgment of Ma'at. The heart was believed to be the center of a person's life, thoughts, and actions. Anubis was the silent guardian of this ritual. In the embalming chamber, every movement was made under his sacred guidance as the body was prepared for eternal peace. But his true duty began during the soul's passage to the afterlife. The soul was entrusted to Anubis, who would guide it through a long journey to Amenti, the Hall of Judgment. Here Ma'at's justice awaited. Ma'at symbolized the balance and order of the universe, the essence of what was right. The soul's heart would be weighed against Ma'at's feather, representing universal truth. A person's heart would either be light or heavy, depending on how truthful and righteous they had been in life. This is where Anubis played his most crucial role. He was present during the weighing of the heart. On one side, Ma'at's feather, and on the other, the heart of the deceased. If the heart was lighter than the feather, the soul would find peace and be welcomed into the paradise ruled by Osiris. But if the heart was heavy, a terrible fate awaited. The soul would be devoured by the fearsome creature Ammit, cast into eternal darkness. That's why Anubis, while judging the heart, was also its protector. He ensured that every soul was judged fairly and justly. Anubis wasn't just a judge in the afterlife. He protected the souls, making sure they didn't stray from their path. The journey to the afterlife was long and full of dangers. Along the way, they would encounter dark and chaotic phenomena. Anubis stood like a shield against these forces, ensuring the souls made it safely to their judgment. And here lies Egypt's greatest secret: death was not an end. Anubis wasn't a god of death, but a protector. His sacred duty was to guard the bodies and souls of the dead. People believed that under his guidance they would descend into the depths of the underworld and be brought before Osiris with the comforting hands of Anubis. This great Egyptian god, the jackal-headed guardian, was the key that unlocked the door to eternity. Anubis' story isn't just about death. He was a figure that promised order, justice, and peace even after life. Every person in Egypt knew that, as the keeper of the dead, Anubis wouldn't leave them alone on their final journey. And so his name became etched in eternity as our guide beyond death itself. Ah, yes, dear friends. In the deep shadows of Egypt's dark temples, by the quiet banks of the Nile, beneath the towering pyramids, a name echoed Thoth, the wisest of the gods, the master of writing and calculation, keeper of magical secrets. His presence was the companion of every soul seeking wisdom, the key that unlocked the door to mysteries. But who was Thoth? How did he become such a powerful symbol of wisdom? Long ago, in those first moments when Egypt's deep history had yet to be written, it's said that Thoth stepped into the world. Some legends describe him as a word spoken from Ra's mouth, a sage brought into being by the very words of a god, created to understand the universe's order and put it into writing. Thoth, with the head of an ibis and wise eyes that could see the hidden corners of the universe, held the workings of nature and the cosmos in his mind, down to the finest detail. He stood beside Ra, recording every word. From the rising of the sun to its descent into the underworld, he knew the cycle in its entirety. First and foremost, we must talk about how Thoth was credited with inventing writing. In Egypt, each hieroglyph wasn't just a symbol, it was part of a sacred language dedicated to the gods. Thoth was the first sage to teach this language to mankind. Writing wasn't just about putting words on paper, it was about transcending time, communicating with wisdom, and achieving immortality. As the inventor of writing, Thoth offered humanity that immortality. His pen was a bridge between gods and humans, ensuring that every word and every thought would be recorded forever. Thoth's power over writing and wisdom wasn't limited to knowledge alone. He also governed calculations and the cycles of time. From the flooding of the Nile to the changing of the seasons, everything was meticulously recorded by him, guiding the people of Egypt through a steady rhythm of life. The cycle of night and day was shaped by his calculations, and even the positions of the stars in the sky fell under his wisdom. Armed with such deep knowledge, Thoth was seen not just as the god of wisdom, but also as the guardian of the universe's order. But when we talk about wisdom and writing, we cannot overlook another vital aspect of Thoth: magic. Ah, yes, in Egypt, magic wasn't just an ordinary practice, it was a divine skill. As a wise god, Thoth held the deepest secrets of magic. He possessed knowledge of mysteries far beyond human comprehension. Thoth's magic was like a bridge between the gods and humans. In Egyptian mythology, wisdom and magic were intertwined because to understand the secrets of the universe also meant wielding the power to manipulate them. Thoth used the magical power of words and symbols to shape the world, maintain order, and create a shield against chaos. Thoth also played a crucial role in the judgment of the dead. Alongside Anubis, he recorded that sacred moment when the heart of the deceased was weighed. As Ma'at's feather balanced against the heart, Thoth documented everything, ensuring that justice was carried out flawlessly. Wisdom and justice were written by his hand, because a world without justice was an insult to Thoth's wisdom. He recorded justice, upheld it, and carried it into the future. And dear friends, Thoth's story doesn't end there. His wisdom continues through infinite cycles. Even today, in every word written and every piece of knowledge recorded, there are traces of Thoth. He is not only a figure in Egyptian mythology, but also a presence in the collective memory of humanity. This great god, revered as a sage among the gods, continues to guide us in our endless pursuit of knowledge, the greatest gift he gave to mankind. So there you have it. Thoth, the master of both knowledge and magic, the genius behind words and symbols. His name echoes in the hearts of every wise person, because knowledge and justice are never-ending journeys. With Thoth's guidance, you are never alone on that path. Let me take you to a world where the living fear the afterlife perhaps even more than death itself. The ancient wisdom of Egypt understood not only the mysteries of this world, but also those of the world beyond. In that world, Duat, the underworld, where souls are judged, face dangers at every step, and embark on a mysterious journey that could end in either paradise or eternal darkness. For the Egyptians, death was not an end. Duat was the beginning of a second journey that started after death. Even pharaohs were said to pass through this path, for Duat was a door that no one could avoid. But what is this Duat? My friends, Duat is a vast underworld filled with shadows. But it's no ordinary land of the dead. In the darkness of the night, the sun god Ra begins his sacred journey. While Ra shines in the sky during the day, at night he descends into the depths of Duat to bring the sun back to life. The souls of the dead accompany him on this journey. But the path is full of dangers. The dead encounter countless demons, the giant serpent Apophis, and many other dark forces. Only those with pure hearts, whose hearts balance with Ma'at's feather, can survive this perilous journey. Belief in the afterlife was so central to the Egyptians' lives that they spent their whole existence preparing for it. Immortality was a dream for them. But this dream wasn't just about living after death. To be reborn after death, like the god Osiris, symbolized a resurrection. Osiris was the god who bridged the gap between life and death. Every Egyptian hoped to cross that bridge at the moment of death and step into eternal life. This is why their bodies were carefully mummified, and spells needed for the soul's journey were written on papyrus scrolls. These sacred texts were called the Book of the Dead. The book guided the soul through Duat, showing it the right path during the toughest trials. But the greatest secret was held by the pharaohs. The divine rulers of Egypt weren't just ordinary humans. They were seen as the shadows of the gods on earth. Each pharaoh claimed direct descent from the gods, and so after death, their journey was different from that of ordinary souls. The souls of the pharaohs descended into the depths of Duat with Ra and met the gods there. They weren't just rulers, but representatives of the divine will on earth. A pharaoh, during their lifetime, didn't just govern the people but also reflected the will of the gods on earth. The pharaohs had the sacred duty of upholding Ma'at, the principle of order and justice. Ma'at was the balance that stood against chaos and darkness. Maintaining this balance was the pharaoh's most sacred responsibility. Because if Ma'at was disrupted, not only the world but the afterlife would fall into chaos. Even the gods would not find peace in a world without balance. This is why pharaohs had to be just wise and powerful, ensuring order both for the living and the dead. Even in death, the pharaohs were tasked with maintaining Ma'at. Their journey through Duat, alongside Ra, was part of an endless cycle. The rebirth of the sun every day symbolized the pharaoh's divine role and the continuation of the god's will. Ra's nightly descent into the underworld to battle Apophis and his resurrection every morning showed that the pharaohs shared in this sacred cycle with the gods. And so, my friends, Duat is not just the journey of the dead, but proof of how life and death are deeply connected. As we delve into the depths of Egyptian mythology, we see how the pharaohs acted as guides in the hands of the gods, ensuring divine order every step of the way. Now listen to me, my friends, because I'm about to take you to the ancient lands of Egypt, to those sacred ceremonies held in the presence of the gods. Picture temples so grand that every stone seems to pulse with divine power, where the very breath of the gods lingers in every corner. The temples of Egypt. These magnificent structures dedicated to the gods weren't just places of worship. They were bridges between the world of humans and the world of the gods, sacred spaces where divine will came down to meet the people. Egyptian temples weren't your ordinary buildings. From the moment you stepped inside, you were greeted by massive columns adorned with symbols of Ma'at, decorated with the stories of the gods. Each pillar rose toward the sky like hands in prayer, reaching out to the heavens. Every room, every wall within the temple was filled with sacred stories. Inside these temples, there were statues of the gods. But these statues weren't just carved stone or metal figures. No, they were the earthly forms of the gods, embodying their presence within the temple. So to worship these statues was to worship the gods themselves. The priests of these sacred places were the servants of the gods on earth. Their duties were of great responsibility. Every morning they would enter the temple and tend to the statues of the gods. The statues were dressed in sacred garments, perfumed with the finest scents, and offered the most precious foods. These offerings were placed before the statues, and after the rituals, the priests would share the food with the people, as it had been blessed by the gods. These daily rituals weren't just ceremonies, they were acts to please the gods and ensure the continued order and prosperity of Egypt. The rituals of worship began with the rising sun and continued until it set. Ra, the sun god, was honored with the first light of day, and the priests would greet the sunrise with prayers. At the same time, ceremonies dedicated to Osiris and Ma'at would take place. These gods, who protected order, were essential for maintaining peace and harmony in Egypt. Without their power, chaos could not be held at bay. Every act of worship was both an expression of gratitude to the gods and a safeguard for Egypt's future. So, my dear friends, how do you think the people of Egypt were connected to their gods? The influence of Egyptian mythology on the people was felt in every part of life. From the farmer working the fields to the pharaoh sitting in his palace, everyone bowed to the will of the gods. This belief system was so powerful that people couldn't imagine life without the gods. The growth of crops, the flooding of the Nile, the rising and setting of the sun, all were at the mercy of the gods. If a harvest was poor, it was believed the gods were angry. Or if the Nile didn't flood, the people would rush to the temples and pray alongside the priests for the gods' favor. In Egyptian society, religious ceremonies and festivals were moments when the gods and people came together. Especially during the flooding season of the Nile, grand festivals were held. The people would dance and sing songs during these festivals dedicated to the gods. During these celebrations, the statues of the gods would be taken from the temple and paraded through the streets. The people believed they were in the presence of the gods in those moments, making wishes and offering prayers. These festivals weren't just fun events, they were the ultimate expression of gratitude and devotion to the gods. In every village and town in Egypt, there was a small temple dedicated to a god. In these temples, daily prayers were offered, and the people would bring offerings to the gods. Their beliefs touched every part of daily life. Farmers would pray to Ra at the break of dawn before heading to their fields. Egyptians made small altars in their homes, asking the gods for protection. They prayed to Ma'at to maintain order in their lives. Illnesses, deaths, or births were all seen as the result of divine will. If a child was born, it was considered a gift from Isis. If sickness swept through a village, the people would rush to the temple, praying to Osiris and Anubis for health and peace. More than anything, the Egyptians lived as though the gods were always with them. These sacred beings weren't just present in the temples, they were with the people in every breath and every step they took. This devotion to the gods sustained Egypt for thousands of years. We've reached the end of our journey, dear friends. Together we've opened the doors to a long, deep, and truly enchanting world. The ancient mythology of Egypt, the mysterious tales of the gods, and the endless faith of the people. All of these resonate like a sacred melody that echoes from thousands of years ago to the present day. No matter how much we tell or how deep we dive, these stories never really end. Because Egyptian mythology is not just a part of the past, it's a universal truth that touches the soul of humanity. We walked with the gods of Egypt and got lost in their stories. We were born under the light of Ra and found new life in the dark world of Osiris. We felt the betrayal of Seth and witnessed Horus's revenge. We weighed our hearts against the feather of Ma'at and embarked on the journey beyond death under Anubis's guidance. And finally, we knelt in the sacred temples of Egypt, in the presence of the gods. These mystical layers of history not only tell us about the past, but also reflect our own inner journeys. The tales of the gods whisper to us ways to find balance amid life's chaos and disorder. Just like the people of Egypt, we too search for equilibrium between order and chaos within ourselves. These mythological stories are not just echoes of a distant past, they offer timeless lessons that still resonate deep within the human spirit today. And now, it's time to slowly depart from these ancient lands, from the world of the gods. But don't be afraid, because these stories, these legends will continue to live in our hearts. They will bring us together again and again in the deep waters of history. So get ready for our next journey, because there are so many more stories to discover and share. Now rest and relax, because the gods are always with you. Close your eyes and try to hear the whispers of Egypt's ancient winds. These winds will always tell you a story, until we meet again in the depths of history and mythology.